I drove 600 miles for Christmas. Mom slammed the door. Sorry, wrong house. Later, my brother said, she thinks $68,540 makes her family. I froze the money. By dawn, 51 calls, 11 threats. Imagine driving 600 miles through a blinding blizzard, your car loaded with carefully chosen Christmas gifts, your heart bursting with a desperate hope for reconnection. You finally reach the doorstep, numb with cold but warm with anticipation, only for your own mother to open the door, look you dead in the eye, and utter those chilling words, "Sorry, wrong house." Then she slams it shut. That's how my last Christmas began, and it utterly shattered everything I thought I knew about family. My name is Autumn Wilson. I'm 32 now, but that night, I felt like that confused, heartbroken kid again. Growing up in our small Midwestern town, I always believed our family was, well, normal. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. Mom was a nurse, Dad ran the hardware store. My brother, Ethan, and I shared a bedroom until I was 11, building epic blanket forts and whispering secrets way past our bedtime. Those memories, they feel almost dreamlike now, like snapshots from someone else's perfect life. Everything shifted when I turned 13. The hushed arguments between Mom and Dad started to grow louder, their voices sharp edges cutting through the thin walls of our home late at night. I'd pull my pillow over my head, pressing it tight against my ears, trying to block out the sound of Mom's muffled sobs or Dad's door slamming rage. Then, one morning, I found Mom at the kitchen table. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her face held this eerie calm. "Your father's moving out," she said, stirring her coffee with a detached air, as if she were just discussing the weather. "He'll still see you kids on weekends." My world, my entire world, felt like it was collapsing, yet the toaster popped up my breakfast with a cheerful, indifferent ding, as if nothing had changed at all. Ethan, just 11 then, took it even harder. He still believed our family was this unbreakable unit. He stopped talking for nearly a month after Dad left. It was a silence that echoed through our newly fractured home. Then, 2 years later, Richard arrived. He swept into our lives with his expensive suits, a car that made our neighbors practically glue themselves to their curtains, and an aura of success that was almost blinding. He owned 3 car dealerships, lived in a house twice the size of ours. Mom, who had always been so practical and grounded, transformed around him. She laughed more, a little too loud sometimes, touched her hair nervously, and started wearing makeup even on weekdays. "He makes me happy," she'd told us, a plea in her voice. "Don't you want me to be happy?" Of course, we did. We just wanted her to be happy. But Richard's presence, his money, marked the beginning of a deeper, more unsettling change in my mother. The woman who taught me the art of coupon clipping and the thrill of a good sale suddenly draped herself in designer clothes. The mother who'd once made us return birthday gifts that were too extravagant now found nothing wrong with Richard showering her with diamond earrings, just because. At first, these shifts were subtle, barely perceptible whispers. But soon, they grew louder. Mom started categorizing our friends' families, who had money, who didn't. She joined the country club where Richard played golf, constantly dropping names of important people she'd met. I remember wearing my favorite thrift store jeans to dinner one night, feeling comfortable and like myself. She pulled me aside, her voice a hushed, urgent whisper. "We don't dress like that anymore," she said, as if poverty might be contagious, a disease I needed to hide. It stung deeply. Despite these growing tensions, these quiet shifts in our family's landscape, I found my escape in school. Education became my anchor, a place where hard work meant tangible results. I threw myself into academics with everything I had. By senior year, I'd earned a partial scholarship to Northwestern University. Richard, ever the pragmatist, offered to pay the difference. But there were strings, always strings. Business or pre-law, he declared. No point wasting money on those artsy degrees that won't pay the bills. My pride, my sense of self, wouldn't allow it. I chose student loans instead, and a communications major. Mom, of course, couldn't fathom why I'd picked debt over Richard's generosity. "Pride won't keep you warm at night," she'd admonish, her voice laced with disappointment. But it wasn't about pride, it was about defining my own path on my own terms. Through college and beyond, I worked multiple jobs, tirelessly building my career from the ground up. Entry-level positions slowly but surely led to promotions, and by 28, I was a marketing executive at a respected firm in Chicago. Each step up that ladder was mine. My effort, my merit. I paid off my student loans early, savored the feeling of that last payment, and started building a solid savings account. That financial independence, it felt like armor. Armor against my mother's subtle digs, against her unspoken judgment of my choices. Christmas, though, remained the stubborn tradition. This one thread that somehow held our fragmenting family together. Even through the increasing tension, we maintained the ritual of gathering at Mom and Richard's house on Christmas Eve. Last year's celebration had been particularly strained. Mom spent most of the evening showing off their newly renovated kitchen to her important friends, while I sat alone with my glass of wine, feeling like a ghost in my own family's home. Richard was deep in business talk with his golf buddies. Ethan arrived late, just long enough for a quick gift exchange before bolting for his girlfriend's family dinner. That awkward, emotionally draining Christmas had been the last straw. It had pushed me to skip Thanksgiving this year. I'd claimed a work project needed my urgent attention, a convenient excuse. But the truth? I simply couldn't bear another holiday of feeling like an outsider, a second-class citizen, in what was supposed to be my family. Mom, predictably, had seemed almost relieved when I canceled. That stung more than I wanted to admit. But Christmas? Christmas was different. Christmas was sacred. Even after Dad left, it was the one constant. So, despite the growing distance, despite the unease, I requested time off work. I meticulously packed my car with carefully selected gifts, each one chosen with an aching hope, and prepared for the 600-mile journey from Chicago to their new home in rural Tennessee. "Are you sure you want to drive all that way?" my friend Julia had asked, concern etched on her face. "You could just fly and rent a car." "The drive gives me time to decompress," I'd explained, trying to sound casual. The real truth was, flying would cut too deeply into the money I'd already spent on those gifts. I'd chosen items I hoped would finally impress Mom and Richard. A designer scarf for her, an expensive, rare bottle of scotch for him, and the latest gaming console for Ethan, knowing he couldn't afford it on his teacher's salary. The day before I left, I called Ethan to confirm the details. "Mom's going all out this year," he'd warned, his voice holding a strange note I couldn't quite decipher. "Richard's business partners are coming for Christmas Eve. Just be prepared." "Okay, for what?" I'd asked, my stomach tightening. "Nothing specific," he'd brushed it off. "You know how she gets around his crowd. Just call me when you're close." That conversation should have been my blaring alarm. But I pushed the uneasy feeling down, deep inside. I clung instead to the fragile possibility that this Christmas, with these carefully chosen gifts and my own hard-won success, might finally bridge the chasm between Mom and me. Perhaps, this time, she'd finally be proud. Perhaps, this time, I would finally feel like I belonged. The first snowflakes began to fall just outside Indianapolis, 6 hours into my journey. By the time I crossed into Tennessee, those delicate flurries had transformed into a raging, blinding blizzard. I was forced to reduce my speed to a crawl, windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the onslaught. My knuckles turned white from gripping the steering wheel, my body tense with concentration. What should have been a 10-hour drive stretched into a grueling 14, navigating treacherous, invisible roads with poor visibility. Almost there, I murmured to myself, more a prayer than an affirmation, as I finally turned onto the private road leading to Mom and Richard's estate. They had moved here last spring, and this would be my first visit to their new, opulent home. The property was hidden behind a towering curtain of ancient oaks and meticulously manicured hedges, a far cry from the modest suburban house where Mom had raised us after the divorce. The security gate swung open after I pressed the intercom button, revealing a long, winding driveway. Then, the house came into view. It wasn't a house, it was a sprawling, colonial-style mansion. White columns stood sentinel, expansive windows glowed with warm, golden light. Christmas decorations adorned every single surface, professionally installed light displays twinkling, life-sized nutcrackers flanking the entrance, an enormous, perfectly symmetrical wreath on the front door. The effect was less cozy Christmas and more holiday showroom. I parked behind a row of luxury vehicles, noticing a catering van among them. Mom had mentioned dinner, but certainly not a catered affair. I checked my appearance in the rearview mirror, applying fresh lipstick, trying to smooth my travel-rumpled hair. After 14 hours on the road, I looked utterly exhausted, dark circles under my eyes screaming my fatigue. But there was nothing I could do about that now. From the trunk, I carefully retrieved the gifts. The designer scarf for Mom had cost nearly a week's salary. Richard's rare scotch had required a special order, a frantic search. For Ethan, I'd splurged on the gaming system he'd been talking about for months, the one he couldn't afford on his high school teacher's salary. My arms were laden, struggling with the weight of the gifts and my overnight bag as I made my way to the front door, snow crunching softly beneath my boots. The door chime echoed impressively when I pressed it. Through the decorative glass panels, I could see movement inside, people mingling, drinks in hand, all dressed in what appeared to be elegant cocktail attire. My heart sank. No one, not a single soul, had mentioned a formal gathering tonight. I glanced down at my casual travel clothes, suddenly feeling painfully underdressed, deeply out of place. The door swung open, and there she stood. My mother. At 54, Patricia Wilson Montgomery looked 10 years younger. Her blonde hair, professionally colored and styled. Her slim figure, showcased in an elegant black dress. For a fleeting, agonizing second, I saw recognition in her eyes. Then, immediately, something else flashed across her face. Alarm. And then, a glacial coldness. Mom, hi. Sorry I'm so late. The weather was just terrible. Her perfectly manicured hand gripped the door edge, cutting me off. I'm sorry, she interrupted, her voice clipped, unfamiliar, entirely devoid of warmth. Wrong house. I blinked, certain I had misheard. What? Mom, it's me, Autumn. Behind her, a group of well-dressed guests turned, their curious gazes now fixed on me. Richard appeared in the hallway, whiskey tumbler in hand, a fleeting look of discomfort crossing his face before he quickly, almost imperceptibly, retreated. Not tonight, Mom hissed quietly, her smile rigid, a mask barely held in place. We have important guests. I told you we do family Christmas tomorrow. No, you didn't, I countered, my voice tight with shock. We always do Christmas Eve together. I drove 14 hours. The door closed in my face. It wasn't quite a slam, but it was firm enough, decisive enough, that the message was unmistakable. I stood there, arms still full of gifts, the weight suddenly unbearable, shock rendering me utterly immobile. Through the glass, I watched my mother return to her guests, laughing as if nothing, absolutely nothing, had happened. Numbness gave way to a burning, mortifying humiliation. I saw a couple walking toward the house, having witnessed the entire exchange. They averted their eyes awkwardly as they approached, giving me a wide berth, as if my unwantedness might be contagious. Snowflakes accumulated on the gifts in my arms as I fumbled for my phone, nearly dropping everything. I called Mom first, watching through the window as she glanced at her screen, saw my name, and tucked it back into her pocket without answering. Next, I tried Richard. Then Ethan. No answer from either. I sent text messages to all three. Asterisk Mom, I'm outside. Please let me in. Asterisk Richard. Did Mom tell you I wasn't supposed to come until tomorrow? Asterisk Ethan. Where are you? Mom just turned me away at the door. Asterisk the message to Mom showed as read almost immediately, but no reply came. Richard's remained unread. Ethan showed as delivered, but not yet seen. 10 excruciating minutes passed as I stood in the intensifying snowfall, my humiliation curdling into a simmering anger, then into a deep, aching hurt that settled in my chest, heavy and cold. A catering staff member exited through a side door, giving me a curious, hesitant look as he loaded empty containers into his van. Excuse me. I called out, desperation overriding every last shred of dignity. Could you please tell Patricia that her daughter is still waiting outside? The young man looked deeply uncomfortable. I'm sorry, ma'am. We're not supposed to interrupt the party with messages. Defeated, I retreated to my car, dumping the expensive, now snow-dusted gifts onto the passenger seat. Tears threatened, hot and stinging, but I fought them back, focusing instead on the immediate, practical problem: where to go. The nearest hotel was 30 minutes away, and in this weather, the drive would be hazardous, bordering on impossible. I had nowhere else to go in this unfamiliar town, nowhere to be. As I sat there, engine running, heat blasting, trying to thaw my frozen fingers, I noticed my mother appear at one of the large windows overlooking the driveway. Our eyes met, just for a brief, shattering second. Then, she drew the curtains closed, erasing me from her view as efficiently, as coldly, as she had erased me from her evening. That's when the tears finally came. Hot, angry tears that blurred my vision as I backed out of the driveway. I had no destination in mind, just the desperate, overwhelming need to escape the humiliation of being treated like an unwelcome stranger by my own mother. I drove aimlessly through unfamiliar roads, windshield wipers barely keeping up with the falling snow, my world once again collapsing around me. My world was collapsing again. Every hope I'd clung to, every expectation, shattered into a million icy pieces on that cold Tennessee driveway. Now, if you're still reeling from that, and trust me, I was too, then do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next, because the story, believe it or not, gets even wilder from here. My phone rang. Ethan's name lit up the screen, a beacon in the darkness. I pulled into the empty, snow-covered parking lot of a closed gas station, my hands still shaking, to answer. Autumn, where are you? His voice was breathless, laced with genuine worry. Driving around in a freaking snowstorm because our mother just pretended not to know me, I choked out, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice, or the fresh wave of tears from forming. She did what? The shock in his tone was real, completely unfeigned. I'm not at the house. I was going to come later, after Mom's big party thing. She didn't even tell me you were coming tonight. She didn't tell me there was a party. I countered, a fresh surge of anger. She never said anything about changing our Christmas Eve tradition. There was a pause, heavy with unspoken understanding. Meet me at Denny's off Highway 41. You know where that is? No, but I have GPS. Give me 20 minutes. The Denny's was nearly empty when I arrived, just a few truckers scattered in booths and an elderly couple nursing coffee. Ethan was already there, waving from a corner table. At 29, my brother looked older than his years, his dark hair starting to recede, perpetual worry lines etched between his brows. He stood to hug me, and I clung to him a moment longer than usual, letting his familiar presence ground me, fighting back another fresh wave of tears. I ordered coffee, he said gently as we sat down. You look like you need it. I need something stronger than coffee after what just happened, I whispered, my hands still trembling, whether from the lingering cold or the raw emotion, I couldn't tell. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. I can't believe she turned you away. Actually, no. I can believe it. Things have gotten weird lately. Weird how? I demanded, my voice raspy. We talk every week, Ethan. You never said anything was wrong. Because it's been gradual, Autumn. And, honestly, I didn't want to worry you. He fidgeted with his coffee mug, his gaze darting around the near-empty diner. Since they moved here, Mom's been completely obsessed with fitting in with Richard's crowd. Country club memberships, charity galas, social climbing, the whole circus. That's not new, I pointed out, exasperated. She's been like that since she married Richard. It's different now. More extreme. He leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially. Did you know Grandpa Earl left her money when he died last spring? I frowned, bewildered. No. She told me he'd spent most of his savings on medical care. That there was barely enough to cover the funeral. Ethan's expression darkened, a bitter edge to his voice. That's a lie. He had a life insurance policy. worth exactly $68,540. The precision of the number struck me, a cold shock. Why would she lie about that? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Because Grandpa wanted it split between all of us. He told me so before he died. Mom, Yumi, equal shares. He even wrote it in a letter, but it wasn't legally binding. My coffee sat untouched, growing cold, a silent testament to the chill spreading through my veins. So she just kept it all? Without telling me. Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. I made copies of everything. He slid them across the table. The insurance payout, Grandpa's handwritten letter, the bank deposit. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you. The papers confirmed everything. The insurance payout, the deposit into my mother's personal account, and a heartbreakingly familiar handwritten letter from our grandfather expressing his wish that the money be shared among his daughter and grandchildren. My hands trembled as I read his beautiful, familiar handwriting, feeling his love and his betrayal in equal measure. There's more, Ethan said quietly, his voice heavy with resignation. She's been telling people you've abandoned the family. That you're too busy with your fancy Chicago job to visit or call. That's absurd, I exclaimed, my voice rising. I call her every Sunday. I send cards for every birthday and anniversary. I know, Autumn. But her new friends don't know that. To them, you're the ungrateful daughter who's too good for her family now. Even some of the extended family believes it. Aunt Carol asked me last month if you were ever going to make amends with Mom. The injustice of it burned in my throat, a bitter, metallic taste. Make amends for what? For being successful on my own terms? For not letting Richard dictate my career path? For not playing along with her new identity as the society wife with the perfect life? The money changed her, Autumn, Ethan sighed, running his hand through his hair again. Or maybe it just revealed who she always was. She joined that exclusive country club where Richard plays golf. Suddenly, she's hosting dinner parties for his business associates, buying art she doesn't understand, and acting like we grew up with silver spoons instead of struggling after Dad left. The waitress arrived, oblivious to the bombshell that had just been dropped, to take our order. My appetite had vanished completely. I just requested more coffee, needing something warm to hold on to. So, what now? I asked, my voice raw after the waitress left. I've driven 600 miles to spend Christmas with a woman who slammed the door in my face. I can't even go to a hotel because my luggage is trapped in my car under all the expensive gifts I bought for people who apparently don't want me around. Ethan reached across the table and squeezed my hand, a gesture of solidarity. Stay with me. My apartment's small, but the couch pulls out. We'll figure this out together. As the crushing reality of the situation fully hit me, tears welled up again, but this time, they felt different. Less about humiliation, more about a profound sense of loss. I had spent thousands of dollars on gifts and travel, taken precious vacation days, and endured a harrowing 14-hour drive through hazardous conditions, all to be treated like an unwelcome intruder by my own mother. I feel so stupid, I whispered, a tear sliding down my cheek, hot against my cold skin. I keep trying to be part of this family, and I keep getting shown that I don't belong. That's not true, Ethan said firmly, his eyes meeting mine. You belong with the people who actually care about you. Mom's the one who doesn't deserve to have you in her life right now. We sat in that Denny's for nearly 3 hours. Ethan, my steadfast brother, filled me in on all the subtle, and not so subtle, changes in our mother's behavior over the past year. How she had started referring to Ethan and me as her first family when talking to her new friends, as if we were a practice round before her real life began. How she had redecorated their new home without a single family photo that included our father or our original, modest house. How she had begun criticizing my career choices to anyone who would listen, painting herself as the concerned mother of a daughter who stubbornly refused her help. By the time we left, the snow had stopped. And something had hardened inside me. The hurt was still there, a raw, exposed wound beneath my ribs. But now it was accompanied by a cold, sharp clarity. For years, I had been chasing the approval of a woman who had chosen status and superficiality over her own children. It was time to stop running that futile race. Ethan led me to his modest apartment, helping me bring in the gifts I'd so carefully selected. We placed them in a corner, a sad, shimmering pile of expensive peace offerings that would never be opened as intended. "Tomorrow," Ethan said softly as he made up the sofa bed, "we're going to have our own Christmas. And then we're going to figure out what to do about Mom and that inheritance." For the first time since arriving in Tennessee, since that brutal door slammed shut, I felt a small, fragile spark of warmth. Not everything was lost. I still had my brother. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was family enough. I woke up on Ethan's pull-out couch to the comforting smell of coffee and the sounds of him rummaging in the kitchen. Sunlight streamed through windows that had no curtains, illuminating the modest one-bedroom apartment where my brother, a high school English teacher, had lived for the past 3 years. The stark contrast between his simple home and our mother's mansion couldn't have been more pronounced. "Morning," he called out, noticing I was awake. "I'm making eggs. It's pretty much all I have besides cereal." "Eggs sound perfect," I replied, sitting up, wincing at the stiffness in my back from the thin mattress. "What time is it?" "Almost 11. You were exhausted, so I let you sleep." After breakfast, we sat at Ethan's small kitchen table, formulating a plan. Despite my initial instinct to retreat, to avoid any further confrontation, Ethan convinced me we needed to address the situation directly. "She's having her big Christmas Eve dinner tonight," he explained. "All of Richard's business partners and their wives. She's been planning it for months. And do you think we should crash it?" The idea made my stomach tighten with a familiar anxiety. "Not crash," he corrected, a mischievous glint in his eye. "I'm still invited. I'll just bring you as my +1. He grinned. "She won't make a scene in front of her precious guests." I wasn't so sure. After yesterday's door-slamming incident, I wouldn't put anything past her. But the alternative, slinking away without confronting her lies, felt far, far worse. We spent the afternoon preparing. I retrieved my luggage from the car and changed into the outfit I'd originally packed for Christmas dinner, a deep green wrap dress that I knew looked good on me, a small defiant act of self-care. Ethan, for his part, put on a crisp button-down shirt and the only tie he owned, a gift from his students last year with tiny Shakespeare quotes printed on it. "Ready for battle?" he asked as we stood by his car at 7 o'clock. "As ready as I'll ever be," I admitted, my heart thrumming with a mixture of dread and resolve. The drive to Mom and Richard's estate felt utterly surreal. Just 12 hours ago, I'd been brutally turned away from this very house. Now I was returning, not as a hopeful daughter, but like some avenging spirit, determined to expose the truth. The driveway was even more crowded than the previous night. Luxury cars lined up like soldiers in formation. A valet took Ethan's keys. "They hired a valet for a family dinner?" I whispered, incredulous, as we approached the front door. Christmas music drifted from inside, along with the murmur of dozens of conversations and occasional bursts of laughter. Ethan squeezed my hand reassuringly before ringing the doorbell. This time, it was Richard who answered. His expression shifted from practiced welcome to outright shock the moment he saw me standing beside Ethan. "Ethan and Autumn," he stammered, his eyes darting nervously over our shoulders, as if expecting to find an army of uninvited guests lurking behind us. "This is a surprise." "Merry Christmas, Richard," I said, summoning a confidence I definitely didn't feel. "I hope you don't mind that I came with Ethan, after yesterday's misunderstanding. I didn't want to miss family Christmas." Richard's discomfort was palpable. He stepped back hesitantly to let us enter. Of course. Your mother will be pleased you could make it, after all." The words sounded hollow, even to him. The interior of the house was even more impressive, more ostentatious, than it had appeared from outside. Vaulted ceilings soared above us, marble floors gleamed underfoot. A massive Christmas tree, professionally decorated, must have cost thousands. About 30 impeccably dressed people mingled throughout the open-concept main floor, many adorned with jewelry that caught the light from the crystal chandelier overhead. "There's Mom," Ethan murmured, nodding subtly toward the dining room. Our mother stood with a small group of women, gesturing animatedly as she told some story that had them all laughing, bright and brittle. She wore a different black dress than yesterday, this one adorned with subtle sequins that sparkled when she moved. She looked elegant, successful, and completely in her element. Until she turned and saw me. The smile froze on her face. For a split second, raw, naked panic flashed in her eyes, a flicker of genuine fear, before she composed herself. She excused herself from her friends, her movements stiff, almost mechanical, and made her way toward us. "Ethan," she said tightly when she reached us, deliberately, pointedly, not looking at me. "Could I speak with you in the kitchen?" "Now, whatever you need to say, you can say it to both of us," Ethan replied calmly, his voice a steady anchor in the swirling tension. Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened, two cold, blue stones. "Fine. Both of you. Kitchen. Now." We followed her through the crowded room, offering polite, brittle smiles to the curious glances from guests. The catering staff worked efficiently in the enormous chef's kitchen, but Mom led us through to a butler's pantry, a small, windowless room that offered a sliver of privacy. The moment the door closed behind us, she rounded on me, her composure finally shattering. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice low and furious. "I told you very clearly that family Christmas is tomorrow." "No, you didn't," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, considering the hurricane raging inside me. "You said, and I quote, 'Sorry, wrong house,' and then closed the door in my face. I was in the middle of hosting important people. You showed up unannounced, looking like you just rolled out of bed. I had driven for 14 hours through a snowstorm to be with my family for Christmas Eve, just like we've done every year of my life." I shot back, the words tumbling out. "Plans change, Autumn. I sent you an email about it weeks ago." "No, you didn't," I countered, pulling out my phone. "I checked every email, text, and voicemail from you. There was nothing about changing our Christmas Eve tradition." Mom's gaze flicked to Ethan, seeking an ally, a way out, but his expression remained stubbornly neutral. "Well, there's clearly been a miscommunication," she said, forcing a brittle laugh. "But you're here now, so let's make the best of it. There's not really room at the dinner table, but you can join for dessert." "That's not why I'm here," I interrupted, cutting through her placating tone. "I want to talk about Grandpa Earl's insurance money." The color drained from her face. Her eyes darted to Ethan, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice had lost its conviction, a tremor now beneath the carefully constructed facade. $68,540, I stated, the number a stark accusation. "The life insurance payout that Grandpa wanted split between all of us. The money you kept for yourself while telling me there was nothing left after his medical bills." "That's a family matter we can discuss tomorrow," she hissed, glancing nervously at the door, her eyes wide with fear. "This is hardly the time or place. Why have you been telling people I abandoned the family?" I pressed on, ignoring her plea, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Why lie about me not calling or visiting when I've done everything possible to maintain our relationship?" Just then, Richard entered the pantry, closing the door quietly behind him, his presence an unwelcome intrusion. "Everything okay in here? The Andersons were asking about you, Patricia." "Everything's fine," Mom said quickly, her voice high and strained. "Just a small family disagreement about Grandpa's inheritance," I added, watching Richard's expression closely. "Did you know about that, Richard? About how Grandpa wanted it split between all of us?" A flicker of discomfort, of guilt, crossed his face. "That's between your mother and you kids. I don't get involved in those matters." He looked away. "Convenient," Ethan muttered under his breath. Mom's composure was completely gone now. Her face was flushed, her voice vibrating with barely contained fury. "You two are trying to ruin my Christmas dinner out of spite," she spat. "I've worked for months planning this evening." "We're trying to understand why you've shut Autumn out," Ethan interrupted, his voice surprisingly firm. "Why you've lied about her to family and friends. Why you kept Grandpa's money for yourself." "I haven't shut anyone out. Autumn chose her path long ago when she rejected our help and moved to Chicago. She made it very clear she didn't need family support. I didn't reject your help, I said, the old hurt surfacing, sharp and fresh. I rejected Richard's conditions on that help. There's a difference. And now you've come back because you want Grandpa's money, she snapped, her eyes narrowing. How convenient. The accusation stung, a cruel twist of the knife. I didn't even know about the money until last night. I came back because it's Christmas and I foolishly thought my own mother would want to see me. Well, you thought wrong, she said, her voice like ice shards, each word a cut. You don't fit into this life anymore, Autumn. You made your choices and I've made mine. Money makes family, and you're not part of this anymore. The statement hung in the air, its cruelty reverberating in the small, stifling space. Richard looked away, his gaze fixed on the wall, unwilling to meet my eyes. Ethan's face flushed with a furious anger. Jesus, Mom, he said softly, his voice laced with pure disbelief. Do you even hear yourself? The pantry door opened again, and Aunt Carol, Mom's older sister, stood frozen in the doorway, a look of profound shock on her face. Patricia, what's going on? Did I just hear you say money makes family? Mom's mask of composure slipped completely. Carol, this is a private conversation. I came looking for more wine, and instead I find you saying the most horrible thing I've ever heard to your own daughter. Aunt Carol stepped fully into the pantry, closing the door firmly behind her. What is wrong with you, Patricia? And what's this about Dad's insurance money? The next 20 minutes were pure chaos. The truth spilled out from all sides, a messy, undeniable torrent. Aunt Carol's outrage when she learned about the inheritance. Richard's uncomfortable admission that he'd known about the money all along. Mom's increasingly desperate, flailing attempts to justify her actions, to salvage her carefully constructed image. Through it all, I stood in stunned, silent disbelief, watching the fragile facade of my mother's perfect life crumble in real time, piece by agonizing piece. I think we should go, Ethan finally said, placing a protective hand on my shoulder, his touch a silent comfort. This isn't solving anything tonight. I nodded, emotionally exhausted, numb. As we turned to leave, Mom grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back tomorrow, she said, her voice shaking with either rage or fear. I couldn't tell which. I mean it, Autumn. This is your last chance to be part of this family. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I saw not my mother, but a stranger. Someone so utterly consumed by appearances and status that she'd sacrifice her own children, her own integrity, to maintain that fragile illusion. You're right about one thing, I said quietly, meeting her gaze. Money does make your family, but it doesn't make mine. With that, Ethan and I walked out of the pantry, through the crowded house full of oblivious guests, and into the cold night air. Behind us, the perfect Christmas Eve dinner continued, the muffled sounds of laughter and clinking glasses a stark, haunting counterpoint to the silence in my heart. But something irreparable had broken inside that house. And strangely, despite the tears streaming down my face, I felt lighter than I had in years. Free. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold, a stark, beautiful contrast to the emotional blizzard of the night before. I woke in a modest hotel room, the kind with generic art on the walls and a faint smell of chlorine. Ethan had insisted on paying for it after we left Mom's house, saying I deserved one night in a real bed after everything that had happened. We had agreed to meet for breakfast, but I had one crucial call to make first. Martin Greenberg had been our family lawyer for as long as I could remember. He had handled my parents' messy divorce, helped me with the daunting paperwork for my first apartment lease, and most recently, managed my grandfather's estate. If anyone would know the intricate legal details of the inheritance situation, it would be Martin. I wasn't sure he'd answer on Christmas morning, but to my surprise, he picked up on the third ring. Autumn Wilson, he said warmly, his voice instantly recognizable. Merry Christmas. This is unexpected. Merry Christmas, Martin. I'm so sorry to bother you on the holiday. Nonsense. What can I do for you? I took a deep, shaky breath. I need to know about my grandfather's life insurance policy. The one that paid out to my mother earlier this year. There was a heavy pause on the line. I see. May I ask why you're inquiring about this now? Because I just found out about it yesterday. Mom told me there was no money left after Grandpa's medical expenses. Martin's sigh was audible, heavy with unspoken understanding. I was afraid something like this might happen. Your grandfather was very clear about his wishes, Autumn, but unfortunately, he didn't make them legally binding. So she had the right to keep all the money? Legally speaking? Legally speaking, yes. The policy named your mother as the sole beneficiary. However, your grandfather did leave a letter with me expressing his wish that the proceeds be divided equally between your mother, you, and your brother. I provided that letter to your mother when the insurance paid out. My grip tightened on the phone, my knuckles white again, but this time with quiet determination. And there's nothing that can be done about it now? Well, Martin said slowly, thoughtfully. That depends on what you want to accomplish. The money is legally hers, but if there's evidence she acknowledged your grandfather's wishes and agreed to honor them, we might have grounds to challenge her control of the funds. What kind of evidence? Emails, texts, recorded conversations where she confirmed she would split the money. Anything that shows she recognized your claim to a portion of the inheritance. I thought of the copies Ethan had so meticulously made, the insurance document, Grandpa's letter, the bank deposit slips. I need to check with my brother, but I think we might have something, I said, a flicker of hope, of strategic resolve, igniting within me. What would be the next step? If you're serious about pursuing this, we could file for an emergency injunction to freeze the funds until the matter is resolved. It's an aggressive move, especially on Christmas. But if you're concerned she might spend the money quickly. She's already spending it, I interrupted, picturing the lavish Christmas party, the mansion, the signs of extravagant living. How quickly could this happen? I could file the paperwork electronically today. It's Christmas, so a judge might not review it until tomorrow, but given the circumstances and the relatively modest sum involved, we might get lucky. By the time I met Ethan for breakfast at a local diner, I had made my decision. We compared notes on what evidence we had. Ethan then revealed the crucial piece, a text message from Mom, sent 3 months ago, acknowledging that she would take care of Grandpa's wishes soon, in response to Ethan asking when we would receive our portions of the inheritance. That might be enough, I said, a grim satisfaction settling in. Martin thinks we can at least freeze the money while the legal questions get sorted out. Ethan pushed his eggs around his plate, his gaze distant. Are you sure you want to do this, Autumn? It's going to make the rift with Mom even worse. What rift could be worse than her telling me I don't belong in the family anymore? That money makes her family, and I'm not part of it. The pain was still fresh, her cruel words echoing in my mind. Besides, this isn't just about the money, Ethan. It's about her lying to us, hiding Grandpa's wishes, and using his inheritance to fund her social climbing while telling everyone I've abandoned the family. You're right, he sighed, finally meeting my gaze. I just hate that it's come to this. After breakfast, I called Martin back and gave him the go-ahead. Within an hour, he had emailed me documents to digitally sign, and by early afternoon, the emergency petition had been filed. All we could do now was wait. Back at the hotel, Ethan and I tried to salvage some semblance of Christmas spirit. We exchanged the gifts we'd brought for each other, a beautiful leather messenger bag for him, a pair of wireless headphones for me. We ordered greasy Chinese food and watched It's a Wonderful Life on the hotel TV, trying not to think about the extravagant family dinner that was likely happening across town, pointedly, without us. My phone rang around 6. It was Aunt Carol. Autumn, honey, how are you holding up? She asked, her voice filled with genuine concern. I'm okay, I replied, surprised by the honesty in my voice. Better than expected, actually. I've been thinking about you all day. I want you to know, I had no idea what Patricia was doing about the inheritance or the things she's been saying about you. None of us did. Her support, her genuine warmth, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Thank you. That means a lot. I couldn't stay at that dinner last night after what I heard, she continued, her voice firm. I told Patricia exactly what I thought of her behavior and left. Several others did too once they understood what had happened. A small, petty part of me was gratified to know Mom's perfect Christmas Eve had been thoroughly disrupted. I filed legal paperwork today, and Carol, I told her, to freeze Grandpa's insurance money until this gets sorted out. Good, she said firmly, a note of approval in her voice. Dad would be horrified by what she's done. He adored you, Autumn. You know that, right? After we hung up, I checked my email and found a notification from Martin. The judge had reviewed our emergency petition and granted the temporary freeze on the funds. It would remain in place until a hearing could be scheduled in the new year. As if on cue, my phone began buzzing with incoming texts, all from my mother. Asterisk, what have you done? The bank just called about a freeze on my account. How dare you do this on Christmas? Asterisk, then a call from Richard. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message. Asterisk, Autumn, this is unnecessary and harmful to your mother. We need to discuss this like adults. Please call me back so we can work this out without lawyers. Asterisk, more texts from Mom followed, alternating between pure rage and manipulative guilt tripping. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me. I was going to share the money eventually, when the time was right. Asterisk, you're breaking my heart, Autumn. Is this really what you want? Asterisk, your grandfather would be ashamed of you. That last one stung, a sharp, unfair jab. But I knew it wasn't true. Grandpa Earl had been kind and fair his entire life. He wouldn't have wanted his money to become a weapon, a tool of division. Block her number, Ethan suggested, seeing the messages flash across my screen. At least for tonight. Give yourself a break. I couldn't bring myself to block her entirely, but I did silence the notifications. Whatever resolution would come, it wouldn't happen tonight. Not on Christmas. The week between Christmas and New Year's Eve passed in a strange, unsettling limbo. Instead of immediately returning to Chicago as planned, I extended my hotel stay, grateful for my company's flexible holiday policy that allowed me to work remotely. Ethan had offered his couch again, but I needed space, real space, to process everything. And he, in turn, needed a break from the emotional fallout to spend time with his girlfriend, who had returned from visiting her parents. My mother's initial barrage of angry messages had given way to a calculated, chilling silence. Richard, however, called daily with increasingly generous settlement offers. Each one was presented as a magnanimous gesture, a grand concession, rather than an acknowledgement of any wrongdoing. Your mother is willing to give you $20,000 if you'll drop this legal nonsense, he'd said during his most recent call, his voice dripping with faux reasonableness. That's more than your share would have been anyway. This isn't about the money, Richard, I repeated, a phrase that had become my unwavering mantra. It's about the principle. And about the lies she's been telling about me. People say things they don't mean when they're upset, Autumn. You know how your mother gets. But that was just it. I didn't know how she got. I had spent my entire adult life making excuses for her behavior, convincing myself that her conditional, fragile love was better than no love at all. The events of Christmas Eve had finally forced me to see the brutal truth I'd been avoiding. My mother's love came with terms and conditions I could never, ever satisfy. On New Year's Eve morning, my hotel room phone rang, an unusual occurrence, as most people contacted me on my cell. It was the front desk. Miss Wilson? There's an elderly lady here asking for you. A Mrs. Eleanor Wilson. She says she's your great-aunt. Great-aunt Eleanor was my grandfather's sister, a woman in her late 80s whom I hadn't seen in years. Curious and a little concerned about what could bring her out in the winter cold, I asked the desk to send her up. She appeared at my door minutes later, a tiny figure bundled in a bright red wool coat, her white hair perfectly set despite the crisp wind outside. Autumn, dear, she said, her voice clear and strong, accepting my hug with surprising strength for someone her age. I hope you don't mind the intrusion. Carol told me you were staying here. Not at all, Aunt Eleanor. Please come in. Can I get you some coffee or tea? Tea would be lovely, she replied, settling into the room's only armchair, removing her gloves with deliberate, unhurried care. I've been hearing quite a story about Patricia and Earl's insurance money, she said without preamble, her gaze direct and unflinching. Is it true she kept it all for herself? I nodded, pouring hot water over the tea bag in a paper cup. She did. And she told me there was no money left after Grandpa's medical expenses. Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. That doesn't surprise me as much as it should. Patricia always had champagne taste on a beer budget, as my brother used to say. When she married that car dealer, I warned Earl she might change. She accepted the tea with a nod of thanks. I didn't come just to gossip about your mother, though. I brought you something. From her large handbag, she retrieved a worn leather photo album. These were Earl's. He would want you to have them. The album contained photographs I had never seen before. My grandfather as a young man, his wedding to my grandmother, my mother as a child, and then, toward the end, pictures of me and Ethan with Grandpa Earl. Fishing trips, birthday parties, ordinary, beautiful moments preserved in fading color. He was so proud of you, Aunt Eleanor said, pointing to a photo of me at my high school graduation, Grandpa beaming beside me. He told everyone how you earned that scholarship on your own merit. How you worked all those jobs to put yourself through college without taking a penny from Richard. Tears pricked at my eyes, hot and unexpected. I didn't know that. Earl understood the value of making your own way. It's why he left that insurance money to be split among you all. He wanted to give you a boost, not a crutch. She patted my hand gently. Your mother never quite grasped that distinction. We spent the next hour looking through the album, Eleanor sharing stories about my grandfather that I had never heard. How he had started his own business with just $50 borrowed from a friend. How he had turned down a lucrative job offer because it would have meant uprooting his family. How he had quietly paid college tuition for a neighbor's son when the family fell on hard times. Your grandfather believed family was about support, not control, she said as she prepared to leave. Remember that. Whatever happens with Patricia. After she left, I found myself drawn to the window, watching the preparations for New Year's Eve celebrations in the park across from the hotel. Families setting up picnic blankets, teenagers throwing frisbees, couples walking hand in hand, ordinary people living ordinary lives, beautifully unaware of the dramas unfolding around them. My phone rang. It was Martin Greenberg. I have news, he said, after we exchanged pleasantries. The judge has scheduled a hearing for January 5th. But more importantly, I've been in discussions with your mother's attorney. She hired an attorney? Somehow, this made everything feel even more real, more official, more painfully irreversible. Yes. And here's the interesting part. Her lawyer has indicated she might be willing to settle. To divide the money as your grandfather intended. If we can keep this out of court. Why the sudden change of heart? I asked, utterly bewildered. Martin's voice took on a diplomatic tone. It seems several family members have expressed their disappointment in her actions, and there may be some concern about how this would look to her new social circle if it became public. In other words, the threat to her carefully constructed image was more persuasive than any moral argument could ever be. What do you think I should do? I asked, my voice tinged with weariness. Legally, we have a decent case, Autumn, but litigation is expensive and emotionally draining. If she's willing to do the right thing now, even for the wrong reasons, it might be best to accept. I promised to think about it and hung up, my mind churning with conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted the fierce validation of a legal victory, a public acknowledgement of her wrongdoing. But another part, a deeper, more exhausted part, just wanted this painful chapter closed so I could finally, truly move forward. As evening approached, my phone rang again. An unexpected caller. Autumn, it's Richard. I'm downtown. Could we meet for coffee? Just the two of us. Curiosity overcame caution, a small flicker of intrigue, and I agreed to meet him at a cafe near my hotel. He was already there when I arrived, looking older and more tired than I remembered from Christmas Eve, the weight of everything seeming to press down on him. Thank you for coming, he said, standing awkwardly as I approached the table. I ordered you a latte. You still take those, right? I nodded, surprised. He remembered. What's this about, Richard? He sighed heavily, running a hand over his thinning hair. I wanted to talk to you away from your mother. To explain some things. Over the next hour, Richard painted a picture of my mother I had only ever glimpsed, never fully understood. her desperate, consuming fear of returning to the financial insecurity of her childhood, her absolute obsession with maintaining appearances among his wealthy business associates, her panicked reaction when the insurance money arrived. Not greed, he insisted, almost pleading, but terror that it wouldn't be enough to secure her future if anything happened to me. Fear doesn't justify lying, I said, my voice firm. Or keeping money that wasn't just hers to keep. Or telling people I abandoned the family. No, it doesn't, he admitted, a rare moment of honesty. For the first time, he looked me directly in the eyes, his gaze steady. I should have said something. When she started spreading those stories about you, I should have corrected them. I'm sorry I didn't. His apology, unexpected and seemingly genuine, caught me completely off guard. Richard had always been a peripheral figure in my emotional landscape, my mother's husband, not quite a stepfather, certainly not a replacement for my dad. Yet, here he was, showing more insight and remorse than my own mother ever had. Why are you telling me this now? Because I've watched Patricia lose herself these past few years, he said, his voice laced with a quiet sadness. The woman I married was kind, despite her insecurities. She loved you kids, even if she didn't always show it well. He stared into his coffee cup, a private sorrow etched on his face. The money changed her. Or maybe it just amplified what was already there. Either way, I don't like what we've become. As we parted ways outside the cafe, Richard awkwardly extended his hand. Whatever. You decide about the inheritance. I hope you'll consider keeping the door open, at least a crack. Not for Patricia's sake or mine. For your own. I walked back to my hotel through streets filling with New Year's Eve revelers. Their effervescent excitement was a stark contrast to my contemplative mood, my mind a whirlwind of Eleanor's stories about my grandfather, Martin's practical legal advice, and Richard's surprising confession. By the time midnight approached, I had made my decision. I would accept the settlement offer, divide the inheritance exactly as grandfather intended, and then donate my portion to the literacy foundation he had supported for years. The money that had caused so much pain, so much division, would finally do some good in the world. And I would close this chapter with as much grace as I could muster. As fireworks exploded over the park, illuminating my hotel room in brief, dazzling flashes of color, I raised a glass of cheap champagne from the mini fridge. To new beginnings, I whispered to the empty room, and to letting go. 3 months after that fateful Christmas, spring had begun to softly soften the Tennessee landscape. Dogwoods bloomed in delicate clusters along the highway as I drove to the courthouse for what I desperately hoped would be the final resolution of our inheritance dispute. The legal proceedings had moved slower than expected, complications arising when my mother initially balked at the settlement terms. In the end, though, the judge had reviewed all the evidence, including Grandpa Earl's heartfelt letter, the incriminating text messages acknowledging his wishes, and poignant testimony from Aunt Eleanor and other family members, and ruled in our favor. Today was merely a formality, the official division of the insurance proceeds into 3 equal shares. I hadn't seen my mother since Christmas Eve. She had refused all mediation sessions, communicating only through her attorney, maintaining her rigid silence. According to Ethan, who still lived in town and occasionally saw her at unavoidable family functions, she had become more withdrawn. Her social calendar was notably less busy as news of our dispute, and her role in it, rippled through her carefully cultivated circle. The courthouse was quiet that morning, just a few lawyers and clients moving through the cavernous hallways. I spotted my mother and her attorney near the designated conference room, her posture rigid, her gaze fixed straight ahead. She wore a conservative navy suit, her usual opulent jewelry conspicuously absent. "Hello, Mom," I said, approaching them with Martin, my lawyer, at my side. She nodded stiffly, a barely perceptible dip of her head, but said nothing. The proceedings themselves were utterly anticlimactic. Papers signed, accounts verified, perfunctory congratulations from the attorneys. My mother maintained her silence throughout, signing where indicated without a single comment. Only when everything was complete did she finally meet my eyes, a flicker of something unreadable there. "I hope you're satisfied," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, brittle with a mix of resentment and exhaustion. "This isn't about satisfaction," I replied, my own voice calm, steady. "It's about honoring Grandpa's wishes. Your grandfather didn't understand the realities of my situation." "Maybe not," I conceded, "but he understood the importance of fairness." She gathered her purse, preparing to leave. "Richard tells me you're donating your share to that literacy foundation." I nodded, surprised she knew. Grandpa believed in their work. Something flickered across her face, respect, perhaps, or merely surprise at my choice. "Well, that's your choice." "Yes," I said simply. "It is." That brief exchange, mundane as it was, represented the most civil conversation we'd had in months. As I watched her walk away, a tiny, solitary figure retreating down the hall, I felt an unexpected lightness. The anger that had fueled me through the legal battle had gradually dissipated, replaced by a calm, quiet acceptance of what our relationship had become and what it would likely never be again. Outside the courthouse, warm spring sunshine washed over my face. I had taken a week's vacation to handle the legal matters. But instead of immediately returning to Chicago, I had plans to stay with Ethan for a few days. Our relationship, forged in the fires of shared hurt and solidarity, had deepened immensely through this ordeal. Weekly phone calls had evolved into a genuine, adult friendship, far beyond our shared childhood memories. "How'd it go?" Ethan asked when I arrived at his apartment that afternoon, his face etched with concern. "Surprisingly peaceful. She didn't fight, didn't argue, just signed the papers and left." "That's not what I expected," he admitted, relief washing over his features. "Me neither," I replied, settling onto his couch, the same one I'd slept on that brutal Christmas night. "I think she's tired of fighting. Or maybe Richard talked some sense into her. He called me last week, asked how you were doing." That evening, Ethan and I met Aunt Carol, Aunt Eleanor, and several cousins for dinner at a local restaurant. What had begun as a small, defiant family rebellion against my mother's behavior had evolved into a monthly tradition, a precious way of maintaining connections that had been neglected for far too long. "Have you thought about what you'll do next?" Aunt Carol asked, her gaze gentle as we shared dessert. "With your mother, I mean." "I'm not shutting the door completely," I said after a moment of careful consideration. "But I'm also not chasing her approval anymore. If she wants a relationship, it has to be built on honesty. On respect." "That's wise," Aunt Eleanor nodded, her eyes twinkling knowingly. "Boundaries are important. Especially with family." The concept of boundaries had been central to my therapy sessions over the past months. After returning to Chicago following Christmas, I had finally sought professional help to process not just the recent trauma, but the years of conditional acceptance that had shaped my relationship with my mother. Through those weekly sessions, I had begun to understand the destructive pattern we had established, my desperate attempts to earn her approval, her increasingly impossible standards. Both of us trapped in roles that brought neither happiness nor growth. My therapist, Dr. Levine, had introduced me to the concept of the grief of recognition, the painful process of acknowledging that the parent you wish you had doesn't exist and never will. That grief had felt overwhelming at first, a crushing weight, but gradually it had become manageable, then profoundly transformative. Accepting my mother for who she actually was, rather than who I needed her to be, had freed me from expectations that could never be met. The day before I was scheduled to return to Chicago, I received an unexpected text from my mother. "I've put some of your childhood things in a box. Richard can drop them off at Ethan's if you want them." It wasn't an apology, or an olive branch, exactly, but it was something. An acknowledgement of my existence, at the very least. I texted back a simple, "Thank you." "That would be nice." Richard arrived the next morning with a cardboard box. "She found these when we were reorganizing the storage room," he explained, handing it over, a faint hope in his eyes. "She thought you might want them before they got thrown out." Inside were photo albums from my childhood, school projects my mother had meticulously saved, my high school yearbooks, and a small jewelry box containing the necklace my grandfather had given me for my 16th birthday, an item I had thought lost during one of their many moves. Thank you for bringing these, I said, genuinely touched by the gesture, however small, however belated. Richard shifted uncomfortably on Ethan's doorstep. She's seeing someone. A therapist, I mean. It was my suggestion after everything that happened. I can't say she's had any major breakthroughs, but it's a start. That information stayed with me on the flight back to Chicago. A complicated emotion, somewhere between fragile hope and deep skepticism, began to take root. I didn't expect dramatic changes or tearful, cinematic reconciliations. But maybe, just maybe, over time, something healthier could grow from the ashes of our old, toxic relationship. Back in my Chicago apartment, I set up the reclaimed photo albums on my bookshelf and carefully placed my grandfather's necklace in my jewelry box. Small, cherished pieces of my history, reclaimed and reincorporated into my present life. That evening, I called Ethan to let him know I'd arrived safely. I've been thinking, I said after we caught up, a new lightness in my voice. What if you came to Chicago for Christmas this year? We could start some new traditions. Our own traditions. I'd like that, he replied, genuine warmth in his voice. Actually, Melissa might come, too, if that's okay. Things are getting pretty serious between us. Of course, it's okay. The more the merrier. After we hung up, I sat by my window, watching the Chicago skyline sparkle in the evening light. The city that had once represented my escape, my frantic flight from a home that no longer felt like mine, now felt like home in a way it never had before. Not because I was running from something, but because I had chosen it, claimed it as my own. The journey from that snowy Christmas Eve to this moment had been painful, yes. It had revealed truths about my family and about myself that had been long buried, truths that had bruised and broken me. But through that pain had come clarity. And through clarity, healing. I had learned that family wasn't defined by blood or by money, but by respect, by honesty, and by genuine care. Some family connections had been broken in the process, perhaps irreparably. But others had been strengthened, forged anew, and new ones formed entirely. As for my mother, only time would tell if our relationship could be rebuilt on healthier ground. I was no longer waiting for her approval to feel complete, no longer measuring my worth through her eyes. Whatever happened between us going forward would be between two adults making conscious choices, not a child desperately seeking validation and a mother withholding it. The inheritance that had sparked this transformation had, in the end, been about much more than money. It had been the catalyst for confronting long-buried truths, for breaking destructive patterns, and for finding the courage to define family on my own terms. In that way, perhaps it was exactly the gift my grandfather had intended all along. What does family mean to you? Is it defined by blood, choice, or something else entirely? Tell me in the comments below. I truly want to hear your thoughts. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life narratives.